I didn't expect to walk into my sister's wedding and get turned into the punchline before the vows even started, but that's exactly what happened. The church in Charleston looked like something out of a bridal magazine: white columns, gold-rimmed glasses, flowers imported from who knows where. It was perfect for Kate, my younger sister, the one my parents treated like she was auditioning for royalty. I was in the second row, because of course I wasn't in the bridal party. Not the maid of honor, not even a bridesmaid, just the military sister, the one they keep in the background. When people glanced my way, I got polite nods. A couple of Kate's friends smiled like they were wondering who invited me. Then Kate herself walked down the aisle, bouquet in hand, grinning like she owned the world. And in a way, she did. My parents had been preparing for this show since she was in middle school. I tried to disappear into the seat. I didn't need to be the center of attention. I've been deployed, I've briefed generals, I've led soldiers in real-life situations where a single mistake costs lives. None of that matters in a family where the only achievement they care about is how good you look in wedding photos. The pastor was about to begin when Kate glanced in my direction. Right there, in front of 100 guests, she tilted her head and said loud enough for everyone to hear. "At least the army gave you a weekend pass, Claire, otherwise, you'd probably miss my big day too." The room laughed. Not a polite chuckle, actual laughter, the kind people can't hold in even when they're trying to. I sat still, back straight, face calm, the way the army drilled into me years ago. My dad smirked and shook his head like Kate had just delivered the line of the night. My mom looked at me, then looked away like she didn't see anything wrong. Here's the thing, I can take enemy fire. I can sit through 12-hour negotiations in a hot tent overseas. But being humiliated by my own family in front of strangers? That hits different. And they knew it. Kate especially knew it. She's always wanted me smaller. I clenched my hands together in my lap, forcing myself to breathe the way I did in Kuwait when convoys stalled and tension ran high. Count 3 in, 4 out. Don't react. Don't give them what they want. But I won't lie, every second after that joke felt like sitting in a spotlight. Guests kept sneaking looks at me like I was some sort of tragic character, the older sister who traded wedding rings for dog tags. My uniform wasn't even allowed. I had on a plain dress, dark navy, nothing fancy. The one thing that actually defines my life, the rank on my shoulder, was the one thing I'd been told to leave at home. The music picked up, the ceremony rolled forward, and everyone acted like nothing had happened. But it had. And no matter how well I hide my expression, the sting was there. Because family drama like this doesn't go away with a laugh track, it lingers. That's when I realized this wasn't just another wedding. This was going to be one of those revenge stories people talk about when they say family revenge stories are the most brutal, because it isn't strangers who cut you down, it's your own blood. If you've ever been in a family moment where someone tried to embarrass you in front of everyone, drop a comment below, I read them all. And if you like stories where family drama turns into real revenge stories, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. The pastor asked everyone to rise, the music swelled, and the show went on. I stayed in my seat, calm, still, but inside I was already replaying Kate's line word for word, storing it away, because I knew this wedding wasn't over, not for me, and definitely not for her. My jaw stayed tight as the ceremony kept rolling, but my mind slipped somewhere else, to the first time I realized the rules in my house were never the same for me and my sister. Growing up, my dad treated me like the practice run. He was Navy for 20 years, the kind of man who expected perfect grades, clean shoes, and yes sir, in the kitchen. When I brought home a B in middle school, he grounded me for 2 weeks and made me rewrite every math problem until midnight. Kate? She came home with a C on the same test years later, and he laughed, patted her shoulder, and told her not everyone was cut out for numbers. That double standard wasn't hidden. It was right in the open, and my mom played along. If I wanted to try soccer, she signed me up and reminded me to keep my uniform spotless. When Kate wanted to quit ballet after 3 lessons, Mom said, "She's just exploring, let her find her passion." I can't count how many times I sat at the dinner table, listening to my dad brag about Kate's natural charm while acting like my achievements were just chores I checked off a list. He never missed one of her school plays, but he skipped my ROTC awards banquet, said he was tired from work. even holidays showed it. On Christmas morning, Kate always had the big gift, the bike, the stereo, the new phone. Mine were practical things. Clothes, school supplies, once even a stack of SAT prep books. Mom said it was because I was serious and needed tools to succeed. It felt more like a polite way of saying I didn't deserve the spotlight. And the photos, God, the photos. In our living room, every wall had Kate's milestones. Prom, homecoming, her college sorority picture framed in gold. My pictures slowly disappeared. My West Point acceptance photo was on the mantle for about a year until one day it was gone, replaced by Kate in a sundress on some beach trip. When I asked Mom about it, she said she was rotating the frames. Funny thing is, the rotation never brought mine back. At family reunions, relatives noticed the difference. They'd greet Kate with, "You're glowing, sweetheart," and then turn to me with a flat, "Still in the army?" Like it was a temporary job I should have outgrown. I tried to shrug it off, but the sting never really went away. That favoritism shaped everything. I learned early to push harder, to keep my head down, to grind while she coasted. When Kate messed up, it was brushed off. When I stumbled, it was a family discussion about how I needed to get back on track. By high school, the roles were locked. Kate was the pretty one with the easy laugh, the one teachers bent rules for. I was the responsible one, the built-in babysitter, the stand-in parent when Mom and Dad wanted a night out. If Kate stayed out late, the question was who she was with. If I stayed out late, the question was what was wrong with me. The real kicker was my dad's attitude toward gender. He used to joke half serious that he wanted a son to carry on the family's service tradition. He got me instead. When I signed my ROTC commitment papers, he muttered, "Guess the army takes anybody these days." Meanwhile, Kate posted about running a 5 Kelvins charity race and he called her an inspiration. Those early years taught me exactly where I stood in the Donovan family. Not as the golden child, not even as an equal, but as the one expected to toughen up, swallow the bias, and keep moving. It didn't matter how hard I worked or what rank I earned. In their eyes, I was the background character to Kate's highlight reel. Sitting in that church, hearing her joke at my expense, all of it came back in seconds. Every holiday slight, every missing photo frame, every shrug from my dad when I achieved something worth celebrating. The wedding was just the latest chapter in a book I'd been reading my whole life. The organ played, the bridal party shifted, and I straightened my shoulders the way the army drilled into me. I wasn't going to give them the reaction they wanted, not then, not ever. The laughter faded, the vows moved forward, but the old truth stayed clear. In my family, one daughter could do no wrong, and the other had to wear armor even when she wasn't in uniform. My shoulders stayed square in that pew, but what steadied me wasn't the music or the ceremony, it was the memory of the choice I made years ago, the choice that set me apart from everyone sitting in the front row. When I was 17, I mailed in my application to West Point without even telling my parents. I knew what my dad would say. He'd already dismissed the idea when I first mentioned it. "That's too much for you, Claire. You're book smart, but that's different from soldier smart." He said it like he was doing me a favor, like lowering my ambition was his way of keeping me safe. I took the SAT again, filled out the essays, lined up recommendation letters, and drove myself to the interview while he was at the golf course. When the acceptance letter came, I remember handing it to him in the kitchen. He didn't even open it right away. He just squinted at the envelope and muttered, "Guess the standards aren't what they used to be." My mom read it over his shoulder and said, "Well, at least it'll look good on the Christmas card." That was the extent of their celebration. West Point was everything they didn't understand: structure, standards, and respect you earned, not inherited. My classmates weren't impressed by charm or last names. They cared if you could keep pace, solve the problem, carry the load. For once, effort mattered more than image. During my first summer, the heat and the endless drills broke plenty of cadets down. I carried bruises on my shoulders from rucksacks and lost toenails from runs. But every time I thought about quitting, I pictured Kate getting another framed photo on the mantle while mine collected dust in a box. That was enough to keep me in formation. Graduation came with a commissioning ceremony. I pinned on my gold bars, sent a photo home, and waited. My dad's reply was a text. "Don't let politics get in the way. Keep your head down." My mom didn't reply at all. Kate posted a picture of her new puppy the same day, and that's what the family commented on. Deployment was a shock, but in the best way. In Kuwait, I learned how to lead when it wasn't a drill, how to brief commanders who'd been in the game longer than I'd been alive. In Poland, I worked with Allied officers who respected me from day one because of what I knew, not who I was related to. I still remember one Polish officer telling me, "You don't speak to fill the air, you speak to move the room." That stuck with me more than any compliment I'd ever gotten at home. The army gave me milestones my family never noticed. I earned a Bronze Star after a logistics mission turned into an ambush prevention. I spent 12 hours piecing together intelligence that rerouted a convoy just in time. The citation sat in a folder on my desk, because when I emailed it to my parents, my dad wrote back, "That's fine, but don't talk about classified things at dinner." Because Kate, meanwhile, posted a sorority reunion selfie, and my mom printed it out, stuck it on the fridge, and told neighbors she was proud of her social butterfly. That's the contrast I lived with. I stopped a potential disaster overseas, and back home, the family headline was Kate's Pilates class. But here's the thing out there, none of that favoritism mattered. In uniform, people saw my rank before my last name. They trusted my judgment because I earned it. Soldiers followed my lead, not because they were told to, but because they believed I wouldn't waste their time or their lives. That kind of trust is heavier than any rucksack, but it's also worth more than any applause at a family dinner. By the time I hit lieutenant colonel, the distance between me and my family wasn't just geography, it was the gulf between recognition that's handed out and recognition that's fought for. Every stripe, every ribbon, every new rank was proof that I wasn't crazy for working harder, for taking the path they all mocked. So when I sat in that church, listening to Kate throw out jokes about my career, I didn't flinch, not because it didn't sting, but because I knew she wasn't my judge anymore. The army had already judged me. My peers, my commanders, my soldiers, they decided I was worth following. That verdict carried a lot more weight than a sarcastic line in a wedding program. The organ music swelled again, pulling me back into the room. Guests turned their heads toward the aisle, smiling at the picture-perfect scene. I kept my back straight, the way I'd been trained. Because no matter how much they wanted me invisible, I wasn't there as a guest. I was there as proof that even when your own family won't stand for you, you can still stand tall on your own. The first red flag didn't come at the church, it came weeks earlier, when the invitation landed in my mailbox. Thick cardstock, embossed lettering, the kind of thing you know cost a fortune just to prove it cost a fortune. I flipped it open and skimmed the details. Date, location, dress code. Then my eyes hit the only line that was bold, centered, and underlined, "No uniforms, please." That wasn't a suggestion. That was a message. Most guests probably thought it was harmless, some aesthetic choice from a bride obsessed with color palettes. But I knew better. There was only one person in the entire family who owned a uniform, only one who could walk in wearing service ribbons and rank. That line wasn't about aesthetic. It was about me. I called my mom the same night. "What's this about no uniforms?" I asked. Her voice was airy, rehearsed. "Oh, honey, you know how Kate Island. She just wants everything soft and romantic. Neutral tones, flowing dresses, your blues are beautiful, but they might feel a little rigid." Rigid. That was her word. Not honorable, not distinguished, rigid. Like my career was an inconvenience to a flower arrangement. "I'm not even in the bridal party," I said. "Why would anyone be looking at me?" Mom chuckled, like I was missing the point. "You stand out, Claire, you always do. That's not a bad thing, but Kate wants the focus to be on her, just wear something understated, keep things smooth." Keep things smooth, that was code for, don't make us uncomfortable. Debut. I hung up and stared at the invitation again. The irony wasn't lost on me. They had no problem plastering Kate's engagement photos all over social media, hiring a photographer who probably cost more than my Jeep. But the one thing I'd earned the right to wear my rank was somehow a threat to the mood board. I pulled the garment bag from my closet that night. My Class A blues were inside, pressed and ready, every thread, every ribbon told a piece of my story. Not a costume, not a prop, but years of sweat and sacrifice sewn into fabric. I ran my hand over the shoulder seam and thought about every ceremony those blues had been part of: promotions, funerals, deployments. Times when words failed but the uniform spoke for me. And now my family wanted me to zip it shut, hang it up, pretend it didn't exist. I didn't slam the bag closed. I didn't curse. I just slid my insignia pin out of the pocket and held it in my hand. Small, silver, quiet. I slipped it into the lining of the dress I planned to wear instead: a dark navy gown, modest but sharp. If they wanted me invisible, fine. But I wasn't leaving myself behind. The next week, I texted my mom, offering again to help with preparations. Maybe set up chairs, check the sound system, run errands. She responded with a single line. "We've got it handled, sweetie, just come and be supportive." Supportive. Another word that sounds kind until you realize it means, sit down, smile, don't take up space. I kept that text on my phone, reading it more than once, not because I needed a reminder of what she said, but because it was proof. Proof that no matter how many times I volunteered to contribute, they didn't want me involved. They wanted me present enough to look like a family, but quiet enough not to disturb the narrative. At work, nobody asked me to tone it down. Nobody suggested I leave my uniform in the closet. My CO expected me to show up as myself, rank and all. My soldiers expected it too. But in my own family, I was treated like the uniform was a prop in bad taste. When I finally flew into Charleston, I carried 2 outfits: the navy dress in my suitcase, the blues still hanging in the bag. I left the bag zipped, but not because I'd given in. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't breaking rules. It's showing up exactly the way they told you not to, and proving that you didn't need their stage to stand tall. The air outside the airport was sticky, humid, the kind of southern heat that makes everything feel heavier. My mom met me at baggage claim. She hugged me, stiff and quick, then eyed my suitcase. "You packed something simple, right?" she asked. I smiled. Simple enough. She seemed relieved, already glancing at her phone to check some wedding planner update. I walked beside her, carrying my own bag, carrying my own silence, carrying the same truth I'd carried for years. In this family, blending in was never about harmony. It was about erasing me piece by piece. And if they thought a line on an invitation could finish the job, they were about to find out how wrong they were. The rehearsal dinner was supposed to be casual, but nothing in my family is ever casual. The restaurant Kate picked had private rooms, white tablecloths, and a wine list longer than my deployment orders. Guests were already sipping cocktails when I walked in. A few gave me polite smiles, most just looked past me, scanning for Kate like she was the main act at a show. She didn't disappoint. Kate came sweeping in on Andrew's arm, perfectly styled, greeting every table like a celebrity on a press tour. My parents beamed at her, their faces lighting up like she'd solved world hunger. I found my seat near the middle. Not next to my parents, not anywhere near the head table, just close enough to clap on cue. My napkin was folded into some kind of origami swan, which felt fitting, because that's how they wanted me: silent, decorative, out of the way. Dinner started with small talk. Andrew's coworkers bragged about closing real estate deals. My aunts asked Kate about honeymoon destinations. Nobody asked me anything. It was as if being deployed overseas was less interesting than hearing about Kate's favorite spa treatments. Halfway through the meal, after a couple glasses of Chardonnay had loosened tongues, Kate decided to turn the spotlight my way. She tapped her fork against her glass for attention. "I just want to thank everyone for being here tonight," she began, smiling sweetly. "Especially my sister, Claire. She finally made it home from the army." Polite applause. I nodded, kept my expression neutral. Then she tilted her head, eyes glinting. Honestly, I wasn't sure she'd make it. I mean, the army practically owns her. Who needs a husband when you can be married to your rank, right? The room erupted in laughter. Not nervous chuckles, actual laughter. Some guests covered their mouths, others leaned forward, delighted by the dig. I sat still. Years of training kept me from flinching. My hand stayed on the table, my jaw locked. Dad leaned back in his chair, smirking. "She's not wrong, Claire. You've given more to the army than to this family. Mom chimed in, light but sharp. Sweetheart, don't be so serious, Kate's just teasing. You do focus on work a little too much though. That was the script. Kate delivered the joke, Dad validated it, Mom softened the blow so they could all pretend it was harmless. Meanwhile, every eye at the table was on me, waiting for a reaction. I gave them nothing. I cut a piece of chicken, chewed, and stared straight ahead. If they wanted fireworks, they weren't getting them. But inside, I felt that old familiar burn. The same burn from Christmas mornings when Kate got the big gifts and I got practical ones. The same burn from holidays when my deployments were ignored while her vacations were celebrated. It was never enough for me to succeed, they needed me smaller, so she could shine brighter. Kate wasn't finished. I'm just saying, if anyone needs legal advice in the middle of a war zone, she's your girl, but if you want a +1 at a wedding? Not so much. Another wave of laughter rolled around the room. Andrew, to his credit, looked uncomfortable. He gave Kate's hand a quick squeeze, like a signal to cut it out. She ignored him. One of Andrew's coworkers leaned toward me and asked, "So, what exactly do you do in the army? File paperwork?" He said it like a punchline, like my entire career boiled down to pushing forms in triplicate. I swallowed my bite and answered flatly. I make sure soldiers don't get court-martialed because someone else didn't do their job right. That shut him up. The rest of the dinner blurred together dessert trays, champagne toasts, a slideshow of Kate and Andrew's engagement photos set to an Ed Sheeran song. Through it all, I stayed quiet, stone-faced, the way you do when you know speaking up will only feed the circus. But I wasn't numb. Every jab, every laugh, every dismissive look carved itself deeper. I could hear my dad's voice from years ago, telling me not to embarrass the family with army talk. I could hear my mom excusing Kate's behavior with, "She didn't mean it that way." And here it was again, played out like a script everyone knew by heart. By the time coffee was served, the guests were buzzing, tipsy, ready to head back to their hotels. Kate floated around, hugging people, accepting compliments, smiling like she'd just won something. I stood near the back, waiting for the crowd to thin. Dad clapped me on the shoulder as he passed. "Try to loosen up tomorrow, Claire. It's a wedding, not a military briefing." I gave him the same neutral smile I'd given generals who thought they knew more than they did. Walking out of that restaurant, I knew two things for sure. First, my family would never see me as anything but the rigid soldier who didn't fit their picture. And second, I wasn't about to let their laughter define me. Not at dinner, not at the wedding, not ever. The night after the rehearsal dinner, I lay on the stiff mattress in the guest room of my parents' house, staring at the ceiling fan creaking above me. Laughter from the restaurant still rang in my ears. I could hear Kate's smug voice, my dad's smirk, my mom's little chuckle to smooth it all over. The whole thing replayed like a loop I couldn't shut off. Sleep didn't come easy. My body was tired, but my head was buzzing the way it used to after 12-hour days overseas when adrenaline wouldn't let me wind down. I thought about how I'd held my composure, how I hadn't given them the meltdown they wanted. It was a small victory, but a hollow one. The house was quiet except for the occasional hum of the refrigerator downstairs. I slipped out of bed, padded down the hall, and stepped onto the back porch. The Charleston night was heavy with humidity, cicadas buzzing like static in the distance. I leaned on the railing and breathed in slow. Out there, no one was laughing. Out there, I could finally unclench my jaw. That's when I pulled out my phone. There was an email I hadn't answered yet from Major General Thomas Riker, my old commanding officer. I'd sent him a message earlier in the week, half inviting him to the wedding. I didn't expect him to come. Generals don't just drop into family events. Still, I'd written, "If you're in town, sir, it'd mean a lot to see you there." His reply had come while I was at the rehearsal dinner. I opened it now, screen lighting up my face in the dark. "I'll try to make it. No promises, but wouldn't miss it if I can." I read it 3 times. Short, to the point, classic Riker. He wasn't one for flowery words. But even that hint that he might show up settled something in me. For once, there was someone in my corner who outranked every dismissive laugh in my family. I slipped the phone back into my pocket and thought about what tomorrow would look like. The church, the flowers, the polished speeches. The stairs when I walked in wearing something simple instead of my uniform. My mother's satisfied nod, Kate's smug grin. But then I thought about Poland, about briefing Allied officers in a freezing tent where nobody cared what you wore as long as you had answers. I thought about Kuwait, about convoy briefings where lives depended on my judgment. I thought about standing in front of rooms full of people who didn't know me personally but still respected the bars on my chest. The contrast was ridiculous. Strangers on the other side of the world valued me more than the people who shared my last name. I headed back inside, passing the family room where framed photos lined the mantel. From pictures of Kate, her college graduation, her engagement shoot with Andrew. My own milestones were gone. The photo of me in uniform at West Point? Missing. The snapshot from my first deployment homecoming? Replaced. I was erased, piece by piece, so Kate's spotlight stayed unobstructed. I paused in front of the empty space where one of my photos used to hang. My mom had told me she was rotating them out. Funny how the rotation never rotated them back in. Back in my room, I unzipped the garment bag holding my uniform. The navy wool gleamed even in the dim light. Ribbons lined up, brass buttons polished. It felt heavier than usual, like it knew it wasn't welcome here. I didn't put it on. Instead, I slid my fingers over the insignia pin, then tucked it into the lining of the dress I'd chosen. If they wanted me invisible, fine. But I'd still carry my rank with me, even if no one could see it. Morning came fast. Sunlight spilled through the curtains, and I heard my mom clattering dishes in the kitchen. Coffee brewed, voices murmured. I showered, dressed, and caught a glimpse of myself in the mirror. Plain navy dress, hair pinned back, no uniform, no ribbons, nothing that screamed, Army. I looked like what they wanted me to look like, ordinary, muted, easy to overlook. But under the fabric, hidden where no one else could see, the insignia pin rested against the seam. A reminder that my identity wasn't theirs to edit. I zipped up the suitcase and carried it downstairs. My mom looked me over, eyes scanning like a TSA agent. She gave a satisfied smile. Perfect, sweetheart, you look lovely. I smiled back, a practiced one that didn't reach my eyes. Kate breezed in minutes later, chattering about hair appointments and photographers. She gave me a once-over and smirked. At least you didn't wear the uniform. I was worried you'd try to make today about you. This. I didn't answer. Silence has weight if you hold it long enough. She shrugged and moved on, barking orders at Andrew about schedules and bouquets. Dad walked in with a tumbler of coffee, already in a crisp suit. He looked me up and down. See? Much better. You blend in now. Blend in. Exactly what they wanted. The car horns outside signaled it was time to head to the church. My mom fussed with her purse, Kate gathered her things, Dad grabbed the keys. I followed them out the door, calm on the surface, but steadying myself inside. Because no matter how carefully they planned to keep me muted, some things can't be hidden forever. The church was dressed to impress. Rows of white hydrangeas lined the aisle, the organ filled the air with a dramatic prelude, and ushers in matching suits guided guests to their seats like they were at a Broadway premiere. I stepped inside with my parents just ahead of me and felt the air shift. People turned, smiling at them, then their eyes slid over me like I was an afterthought. An usher asked for my name, glanced down at the seating chart, and led me to the second row. Not the front, not anywhere close to the bridal party. Just behind a row of cousins and family friends who probably hadn't seen Kate in years but still rated closer to the spotlight than I did. The program sat on my chair, thick ivory cardstock with gold letters spelling out the wedding of Catherine Donovan and Andrew Brooks. I flipped it open, scanning the bridal party list. Maid of honor, Sophie Marshall. Bridesmaids, Danny, Lauren, Mia, and two others I'd never met. College friends, sorority sisters, the same crew Kate vacationed with on spring breaks. My name wasn't there, of course. Not even a footnote, not a thank you for flying halfway across the world after deployment. As guests trickled in, whispers floated past me. Is that her sister? One woman asked another. She doesn't look like the photos. Another leaned over to me with a polite smile. Were you in Kate's sorority too? I kept my tone flat. I'm her sister. The woman blinked, surprised. Oh. I didn't realize. You're not in the photos. Of course I wasn't. Kate made her entrance a few minutes later, radiant in lace, arm hooked through Dad's. He straightened his posture, puffed his chest out, and beamed as though he were the one being celebrated. They walked slowly down the aisle, while guests craned their necks for the perfect picture. My mom dabbed her eyes with a tissue, overwhelmed by the performance of it all. Kate's grin widened as she passed me, her eyes flicking just long enough to send a message, "This is my show, not yours." I sat still, hands folded tight, refusing to shift under her gaze. The pastor welcomed everyone, and the ceremony rolled forward in a haze of carefully rehearsed cues. Bridesmaids floated into place, Andrew's groomsmen lined up stiffly, and the photographer crouched near the altar, snapping away like it was a magazine spread. Sitting there, I felt less like family and more like a placeholder. A warm body to fill a seat, to make the photos look complete. Every detail had been curated, from the blush-colored flowers to the string quartet playing Taylor Swift as though it were Mozart. Every detail except me. When the pastor asked who gives this woman away, Dad's voice rang out loud and proud, "Her mother and I do." His smile stretched wide, his tone booming with confidence. It was the most animated I'd seen him in years. He hadn't sounded that proud when I commissioned as an officer, not when I promoted, not even when I got back from deployment. But walking Kate down the aisle? That was worth the show. The guests leaned forward, charmed by the family moment. No one noticed me sitting just a few feet away, jaw tight, shoulders squared. The vows started, full of promises about laughter, patience, and choosing each other even when life gets hard. The crowd awed at all the right lines. Kate dabbed a fake tear, Andrew squeezed her hand, and the photographer caught every angle. And me? I stared at the back of my dad's head, at the proud tilt of his shoulders, and realized nothing I could do in uniform would ever earn that same posture from him. He wanted this picture-perfect wedding, not a daughter who led soldiers through minefields or briefed generals in combat zones. I forced myself to unclench my fists, smoothing the program across my lap. The cardstock bent under my thumb, leaving a sharp crease. The weight in my chest wasn't from envy, it was from recognition. I'd been preparing for this moment without realizing it, the moment when family drama became undeniable, when the favoritism wasn't whispered but staged for an entire audience. The pastor's voice droned on, Kate's friends smiled from the front row, and I sat there like an outsider wearing my own last name. No rank, no recognition, no acknowledgement that I was anything more than the sister who didn't fit the picture. But just because they treated me like a prop didn't mean I had to play the part. I sat taller, spine straight, letting my silence carry more weight than their applause ever could. The string quartet swelled again, and the show continued. The pastor's words blurred as the ceremony moved forward, but every sense sharpened when Kate decided the spotlight wasn't enough. It wasn't enough that she had the dress, the flowers, the guests, and my parents hanging on her every move. She needed to take one more swing at me, even in the middle of her vows. She laughed softly, turned to the crowd, and said, "I asked my sister if she wanted to do a reading today, but she said she's better at barking orders than reading scripture." The room erupted again. Not polite laughter, actual belly laughs from cousins, friends, and even a few groomsmen. Phones shifted as guests whispered and snapped photos, probably thinking this was all part of Kate's charming personality. I sat frozen. Every instinct told me to react, but years of training kept me in check. The army drills you to control your body language under pressure. Don't flinch, don't give it away, don't let anyone see the crack. My face stayed neutral, but my chest tightened like someone had driven a fist into my ribs. From the front row, Dad leaned toward Mom and muttered just loud enough, "She's not wrong." Mom gave a quick smile, like she wanted to hide her agreement but couldn't resist. I pressed the program flat on my lap, focusing on the paper fibers digging into my palms. The sound of laughter around me turned into static. I thought about briefings in Kuwait where commanders tested you with trick questions, trying to see if you'd break. I thought about interrogations where silence was stronger than any answer. Those moments weren't theory, they were my reality, and if I could survive those, I could sit through the circus. But sitting didn't mean I didn't feel the sting. The insult wasn't about scripture or orders, it was about stripping me down to a caricature, the rigid soldier sister who couldn't play along, the one too stiff to be part of their carefully curated family photo. I looked at Kate standing up there, bouquet clutched, veil glowing in the candlelight. She soaked in the laughter like applause, feeding off it. This wasn't nerves, this was deliberate. Her grin wasn't innocent, it was sharp. The pastor cleared his throat awkwardly, trying to redirect. "Let's continue," he said gently, shifting the ceremony back on track. But the damage was done. The guests had their entertainment, Kate had her laugh, and I had another reminder of exactly where I stood in this family, the easy target. Andrew glanced at me for a split second. His face flickered with something that looked like discomfort, maybe even embarrassment. He knew the joke went too far. He gave Kate's hand a little squeeze, a quiet plea to rein it in. She ignored him, still smiling. The vows resumed, filled with clichés about love, patience, and laughter. People dabbed at tears, murmured about how beautiful it all was. But in the second row, I felt none of it. Instead, I thought about all the times I'd been told I was too much. Too disciplined, too serious, too ambitious. And now, too military. My achievements, my service, my sacrifices all boiled down to a punchline at my sister's wedding. The photographer clicked away, capturing the perfect angles, none of which included me. That was the point. The whole event was designed to erase me, to make me the extra who happened to share DNA with the star of the show. I sat taller in my seat, back straight, eyes forward, not out of pride but because slumping would have been surrender. I let them laugh, let them whisper, let them fill the church with noise. Silence was my weapon now. And in that silence, I reminded myself of something my first CO told me: you don't win every battle by speaking, sometimes you win by refusing to fall apart. The ceremony moved on as if nothing had happened. The pastor read from Corinthians, the string quartet played softly in the background, and Kate dabbed at her eyes with a tissue for the cameras. Guests leaned in, mistaking her performance for sincerity. But for me, the moment was clear. This wasn't about vows or marriage, this was about power. Kate used her stage to shrink me. My parents let her. The guests joined in. And I endured it, not because I was powerless, but because I refused to let them see me break. The organ swelled, and the show continued. The laughter hadn't even settled when the pastor shifted awkwardly, glancing down at his notes and then back at the pews. His voice carried a hint of hesitation, the kind you hear when someone decides on the fly. "At this time," he said, "I'd like to invite Claire Donovan to read a passage for us." Heads turned, a ripple of surprise moved through the crowd. I hadn't been listed in the program. No one expected me to stand up, least of all Kate. Her eyes darted to me, a flash of irritation breaking through her bridal smile. She hadn't planned for this. I rose slowly, sliding the program onto my chair. My heels clicked softly against the stone floor as I walked down the aisle. The silence grew thicker with each step. Guests craned their necks. Some whispered, probably wondering if this was another joke, another setup for entertainment. The pastor handed me the Bible, open to the familiar page. My eyes scanned the words, but I already knew them by heart. Years of ceremonies, funerals, and military chapels had etched them into my memory. I adjusted the microphone and read, voice steady, clear, unshaken. Love is patient, love is kind, it does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud. The words floated into the air, calm but sharp. My gaze lifted briefly from the page, sweeping over the faces in front of me. The bridal party fidgeted, a few guests shifted in their seats. I continued, each line deliberate. It does not dishonor others, it is not self-seeking, it is not easily angered, it keeps no record of wrongs. That phrase, "it does not dishonor others," hung heavier than the rest. I didn't pause for effect, but the timing spoke for itself. A hush fell across the church. Even the photographer lowered his camera. My eyes stayed fixed on the page, but in my peripheral vision I saw Kate stiffen. Her smile faltered, her bouquet trembling just slightly in her grip. Dad's jaw clenched. Mom pressed her lips together, the polite mask slipping for half a second. I finished the passage cleanly. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. Then I closed the book, handed it back to the pastor, and stepped down without another word. The silence that followed wasn't comfortable. It was the kind that presses on people's skin, makes them acutely aware of themselves. Some guests shifted in their seats, others kept their eyes fixed forward, pretending not to notice the tension. I walked back to my place in the second row and sat down, spine straight, face calm. I didn't need to glare at Kate or exchange looks with anyone. The words had already done the work. The pastor cleared his throat, clearly relieved to move things along. "Thank you, Claire," he said, before guiding the ceremony back into its script. But the energy in the room had changed. For the first time all day, the spotlight slipped from Kate. The guests weren't just admiring her gown or listening to her vows, they were replaying the line I'd read, the one that cut through the rehearsed perfection: "It does not dishonor others." Andrew glanced at me again, subtle, but with something like gratitude in his eyes. He knew what had just happened. He knew his bride had crossed a line, and he knew I'd answered without ever raising my voice. Kate, on the other hand, avoided looking at me entirely. She fixed her eyes on the pastor, nodding, smiling, pretending everything was fine. But her jaw was tight, her bouquet gripped so hard the flowers bent under her fingers. The ceremony moved forward with vows and rings, the usual rhythm, but the mood wasn't the same. The laughter had drained out of the room. People clapped when they kissed, cheered when they walked back down the aisle, but the cheers didn't carry the same energy. The echo of scripture lingered, heavier than any applause. As everyone stood to follow the couple out, I stayed seated for a beat longer. I wanted the weight of my silence to land, to remind them I wasn't a prop in their production. Then I rose, calm and measured, and joined the flow of guests exiting the church. Outside, the Charleston sun was blinding. Photographers scrambled for shots of Kate and Andrew on the steps, guests tossed rose petals, and my parents basked in the glow like politicians after a campaign win. But even out there, the words still hung between us. I saw it in the stolen glances, the stiff smiles, the way people shifted when they caught my eye. I didn't need to gloat, I didn't need to remind anyone what I'd read. They all remembered. And the best part? It hadn't been a speech, a confrontation, or a scene. It had been a scripture reading, something no one could accuse me of twisting. The message was universal, undeniable, and perfectly timed. The petals kept flying, the camera shutters clicked, but beneath the surface, the perfect wedding day had a crack running straight through it. And all I had to do was read the truth out loud. The reception hall at the yacht club looked like something out of a lifestyle magazine. Chandeliers sparkled above polished floors, champagne flutes clinked as waiters floated between tables, and a string quartet shifted to soft jazz. Kate and Andrew posed for photos in front of a flower wall, my parents circling them like proud campaign managers. I found my seat at a round table near the middle, close enough to see the head table, but far enough to remind me I wasn't part of it. My name card read Claire Donovan, no title, no rank, just a name stripped bare. Guests buzzed with small talk. Kate's friends swapped stories about bachelorette trips, Andrew's coworkers boasted about real estate sales, and my parents glided between tables, soaking in compliments about how stunning the bride looked. I sipped water, steady and silent, letting their chatter wash over me. Then the air shifted. The double doors opened, and a man in a charcoal suit walked in with the kind of presence you couldn't ignore even if you tried. Heads turned. Conversations faltered. He wasn't loud, but his arrival carried weight. Major General Thomas Riker. I hadn't been sure he'd come. His email had been vague, polite but non-committal. But here he was, scanning the room until his eyes found mine. He gave a single nod, calm and deliberate. My dad noticed him too, his smile froze. He knew that face. He knew the name. Riker had been my commanding officer years ago, the man who signed off on my last promotion, the mentor whose evaluation reports carried weight at the Pentagon. To my family, he was no casual guest, he was someone they couldn't brush off with a smirk. The clinking of silverware against a glass broke the tension. The best man stood, cleared his throat, and gave the expected speech full of jokes about Andrew's bad cooking and sentimental lines about friendship. Guests laughed, clapped, raised their glasses, the maid of honor followed, gushing about Kate's loyalty and charm. Another round of applause. Then, before the MC could move on, Riker rose from his seat at the back. The room hushed without being asked. He didn't need a microphone, his voice carried naturally, measured and firm. "I hadn't planned to speak tonight," he began. "But after what I've seen and heard, I feel compelled to." The quiet deepened, every eye was on him. "I've had the honor of serving with thousands of soldiers in my career," Riker said, glancing briefly in my direction. "But very few have displayed the character, the intelligence, and the steadiness under pressure that Lieutenant Colonel Claire Donovan brings to every mission." A ripple went through the room. I sat still, spine straight, refusing to shift under the sudden spotlight. Riker continued, his tone even but commanding. "She has operated in environments most people in this room can't even imagine. She has led soldiers through situations where a single mistake could cost lives. She has carried more weight on her shoulders than any one person should have to, and she did it without complaint, without arrogance, and with unwavering responsibility." Guests listened intently. My parents stiffened, their smiles brittle. Kate froze at the head table, her bouquet resting awkwardly in her lap. "And yet," Riker said, pausing just long enough for emphasis, "too often, service like hers is overlooked, sometimes even diminished. I've seen it happen in boardrooms, I've seen it happen in politics, and tonight I saw it happen here." The words landed like a stone dropped in water. No one dared move. "But the truth is simple," Riker concluded, raising his glass. "Any room that includes Lieutenant Colonel Donovan is better for it. And if you've missed that, you've missed something important." He lifted his glass higher. "To Claire." For a split second, the silence hung heavy. Then hands moved, glasses lifted, and applause filled the room. Not polite clapping, genuine, steady, resonant. Even Andrew's father stood and joined in, setting the tone for everyone else. I didn't smile, didn't tear up, didn't break my composure. I just gave Riker a firm nod from my seat. Across the table, a few of Kate's friends looked uncomfortable, whispering to each other. Andrew gave me another glance, this one longer, like he finally understood what his bride had chosen to mock. My dad sat rigid, jaw tight, unable to meet my eyes. My mom's lips twitched, trying to form a smile that didn't quite make it. Kate shifted in her chair, bouquet stems cracking in her grip. The applause lingered, echoing through the hall, until it slowly gave way to the clink of glasses and the return of soft jazz. But the energy had changed. The room no longer revolved entirely around the bride. For the first time that day, the spotlight had slipped, and it hadn't slipped by accident. I sat still, calm on the surface, but inside I felt something I hadn't felt in years at a family gathering: balance. Riker's words hadn't erased the mockery, but they cut through it with a clarity no one in that room could ignore. The waiters moved again, pouring more wine, carrying plates of salmon and asparagus. Guests shifted back into their conversations, but the air wasn't the same. It carried weight now. And every glance that flicked my way carried a little more respect than it had an hour earlier. The applause from General Riker's toast still lingered in the air when dinner was served. Plates of salmon, asparagus, and roasted potatoes appeared, waiters topping off glasses of champagne. Guests tried to slide back into their conversations, but the mood had shifted. The easy laughter from earlier wasn't there. People kept sneaking glances toward me, then quickly away, like they weren't sure what to do with the new information they'd just been handed. Kate kept her smile plastered on, but the tension showed in her jaw. Every time someone mentioned how impressive General Riker's words had been, her grip on her fork tightened. She leaned into Andrew, whispering in his ear. He nodded politely, clearly wishing she'd just drop it. I sat at my table, cutting into the salmon, acting as if nothing unusual had happened. That was the key: never overplay a win. Let the silence, let the glances, let the whispers do the work. The DJ shifted the music, inviting people onto the dance floor. Couples swayed, kids darted between tables, older relatives clapped along. I stayed put, perfectly content to observe. Weddings weren't my arena anyway. I knew how to lead a convoy through hostile checkpoints. I didn't need to prove I could do the electric slide. Kate, of course, twirled onto the floor with Andrew, her dress catching the light. She laughed loud enough for everyone to hear, pulling guests one by one into her orbit. My parents clapped from the sidelines, their smiles wide, as if Riker's toast had never happened. But cracks had formed. I noticed it in the way Andrew's boss, Richard Palmer, kept watching me from across the room, his expression thoughtful. I noticed it in the way a few of Kate's friends looked at me now, not with mockery, but with something closer to unease. When the music paused for speeches again, Kate seized her chance. She took the microphone, bouquet still in hand, and beamed at the crowd. I just want to thank everyone again for coming tonight. It means the world to us. And I want to especially thank my family, Mom, Dad, and of course my sister, Claire. Polite applause followed. I kept my face neutral. Then she tilted her head, that familiar gleam in her eyes. Claire's been so busy saving the world, we didn't know if she'd make it back for this, but she did. And I promised her I wouldn't make her give a speech, since she's better at briefings than parties. Laughter rippled across the room again, not as loud as before, but enough. My parents chuckled, Dad even clapped once like she'd landed a great line. I set my glass down, the stem clicking against the table. Kate wasn't finished. Honestly, I think we were all a little nervous she might try to turn the reception into a mission debrief. But don't worry, everyone, she left her uniform at home. The laughter this time was thinner, less confident. A few guests glanced between her and me, sensing the tension. General Riker sat stone-faced at the back, not moving a muscle. I didn't rise, didn't ask for the mic, didn't break the calm line of my posture. Instead, I held her gaze from across the room, steady and unflinching. She faltered for just a second, enough for me to see the flicker of doubt behind her smile. Andrew shifted uncomfortably beside her, leaning toward the mic. All right, let's raise a glass to family, to support, and to new beginnings. His tone was sharp, an attempt to redirect. Guests obediently lifted their glasses, some eager to move past the awkwardness. But the damage was already done. Kate had shown her hand again, her need to drag me down even after Riker's toast had already shifted the room. She couldn't let it go. And the more she pushed, the more obvious it became to everyone that this wasn't harmless teasing. It was envy, plain and simple. I sipped my champagne and let the moment hang. The crowd clapped, glasses clinked, and Kate forced another smile as she handed the mic back to the DJ. But she couldn't erase the unease that lingered. Across the room, Richard Palmer's eyes narrowed slightly. He leaned back in his chair, arms folded, clearly considering something. Unlike my family, he didn't need years of context to see what was happening. One night was enough. The music swelled again, pulling people back onto the dance floor. Guests laughed, kids squealed, plates clattered. But under it all, the air had changed again. It wasn't just my silence carrying weight now. It was the awareness creeping into the room, awareness that maybe the bride's sister wasn't the problem after all. I leaned back, calm, steady, letting the night unfold. Some battles you don't fight with words, sometimes you just let the other side keep talking until they bury themselves. The dance floor buzzed with noise, but at the head table, Kate was still simmering. I could see it in the way she gripped her glass too tight, in the way her smile looked stretched instead of natural. She couldn't stand that General Riker's words still hung in the air, softening the crowd toward me, and she sure as hell couldn't let the attention drift anywhere but her. So she tried again. During a lull between songs, she snagged the microphone from the DJ with the same confidence she used to grab the last word at every family dinner. Before we get back to the fun, she said, voice dripping with cheer, I just want to circle back to my amazing sister. She really has given everything to the Army. And we all know she'd be married by now. If the Army gave out husbands with those medals. The joke landed like a stone. A few strained laughs bubbled up, but most people shifted in their seats. The earlier energy of the room didn't return. Kate didn't notice or didn't care. She kept going. Honestly, she added with a chuckle, I worried she'd wear her uniform tonight. Can you imagine? All those medals clashing with the blush tones? Thank God she listened for once. That did it. The thin laughter died completely. Forks clinked against plates, guests stared down at their napkins, and an uncomfortable silence spread like a wave. Then Richard Palmer, Andrew's boss, stood up. If General Riker's presence had carried military weight, Palmer's carried corporate authority. He was the kind of man people noticed, not because he was loud, but because every move he made looked intentional. He adjusted his cufflinks, set his glass down, and spoke just loud enough to cut across the hall. "Catherine," he said evenly, "may I say something?" Kate froze, caught off guard. "Oh, of course," she stammered, trying to keep her cheerful tone. Palmer didn't take the mic, he didn't need it. His voice was measured, steady, the kind that makes a room listen whether they want to or not. "I've been in business a long time. Long enough to know that success doesn't come from mocking someone else's accomplishments, it comes from respecting them." The crowd quieted, all eyes snapping to him. "And tonight," he continued, "I've watched Claire handle herself with more composure than most executives I've ever managed. She's sat here while being reduced to punchlines, and she hasn't flinched once. That kind of steadiness? That's leadership." Kate's smile cracked. She tried to laugh it off, but Palmer wasn't done. "You may think mocking service is clever," he said, his gaze never leaving her, "but let me tell you something, the world runs because people like your sister do their jobs. People like her keep things moving when the rest of us are busy patting ourselves on the back." A murmur rippled through the crowd, heads nodding, glasses shifting. Palmer leaned back slightly, his tone firm but calm. "If you want to know what real strength looks like, Catherine, stop looking in the mirror on your wedding day and start looking at the woman you've been trying to tear down." The words landed like a hammer. No yelling, no theatrics, just clean, undeniable truth. The silence afterward was deafening. Then, slowly, applause started. A few claps at first, then more, until the room filled with it. Guests turned toward me, some smiling, some nodding, others just clapping because they finally understood what they'd been ignoring all night. Kate stood frozen, bouquet trembling in her hand, her cheeks flushed crimson. Andrew stared at his plate, clearly wishing the floor would open up. My parents sat stiff, their smiles gone, faces locked in expressions they couldn't disguise. I didn't move, didn't smile, didn't gloat. I stayed exactly as I was, calm, steady, letting the moment stand on its own. Revenge doesn't always come with fireworks. Sometimes it comes when the right person says what you've been holding back for years, and the whole room hears it. Palmer picked up his glass again, gave me the smallest nod of acknowledgement, and sat down. The applause lingered before fading back into the clink of glasses and shuffle of waiters. But the atmosphere had changed for good. Guests no longer looked at me like the rigid sister in the background, they looked at me with something closer to respect. And Kate? She was no longer the flawless star of the evening. She'd been checked, publicly and unmistakably, by someone she couldn't dismiss. I took another sip of champagne, my face still composed, but inside, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time at a family gathering: vindication. Not loud, not dramatic. Just quiet and undeniable. The music picked up again, couples drifting back to the dance floor, kids running between tables. The show of a wedding resumed, but beneath it all, the hierarchy had shifted. And this time, the laughter wasn't at my expense. The applause from Palmer's words eventually died down, but the shift in the room never left. Guests went back to their meals, the DJ queued up another round of dance music, and the evening rolled forward. But under the chatter and clinking glasses, something had broken. Kate wasn't glowing anymore. Her laugh was brittle, her bouquet wilted in her grip, and she avoided looking anywhere near my table. I sat steady, sipping water, letting the weight of silence do what words never could. I didn't need to defend myself. Two men who had no stake in this family had already done it for me. That was the part that stung my parents the most. The truth came from outsiders they couldn't control. Later in the evening, a little girl in a frilly pink dress came running past my chair. She skidded to a stop, wide-eyed, frosting smudged on her chin. "Are you like Captain Marvel in real life?" she asked, clutching her cupcake like it was a shield. I blinked, then laughed, the first genuine laugh of the whole day. "Something like that," I told her. "I don't fly, but I do help people." Her eyes grew even wider. That's cooler, she whispered, then darted back toward the dessert table. Guests nearby smiled quietly, some nodding. It was small, but it cut deeper than any toast. Respect from someone too young to fake it. Not long after, I slipped away to the restroom. The music thumped faintly through the walls, muffled laughter echoing down the hall. I was fixing my hair in the mirror when the door creaked open and Kate stepped inside. Her eyes were rimmed red, mascara clumped at the edges. She looked at me like she wasn't sure if she wanted to fight or collapse. "I didn't know he'd say that," she muttered, voice tight. "Palmer. Or the general. I didn't know it would go like this." I kept my voice even. "You didn't need them to say anything, Kate. You just needed to stop making me the punchline." Her arms folded across her chest. Defensive. "You don't get it. You've always had everything figured out. Straight A's, West Point, medals. I was the one who had to smile and charm my way through. Do you know how small that makes me feel? Standing next to you?" I studied her reflection in the mirror. "I never asked you to stand smaller, but I did expect you not to shove me down to make yourself taller." Tears welled in her eyes. She looked down, fingers worrying the hem of her dress. I thought it would just be a good day. That we could all pretend for once." My voice stayed calm, measured. "You don't fix family drama by pretending, you fix it by not letting it happen in the first place." Silence stretched, broken only by the faint bass line from the DJ outside. Kate sniffed, wiped at her eyes, and whispered, "I don't hate you, I just don't know how to stand next to you without feeling like I disappear." That. I let out a slow breath. "That's not my fault, Kate, that's on Mom and Dad, they set the stage, you just learned the script." Her lips trembled. For a moment, she looked younger, smaller, like the kid who used to borrow my sweaters without asking. But then she straightened, pulling her shoulders back, pasting the bridal mask back on. "I should get back out there," she said softly. I nodded. She slipped out the door, leaving the faint scent of roses and hairspray in her wake. When I finally returned to the hall, my mom was waiting just inside. Her expression was tight, controlled, like she'd rehearsed it. She grabbed my arm gently but firmly. "You didn't need to humiliate your father like that tonight." I arched an eyebrow. "I didn't humiliate anyone." Her voice sharpened. "Don't play games, Claire, the Bible reading, the general, Palmer, none of that was necessary, he's an old man, you could have let him have his night." Beth. I leaned in just enough so she couldn't mistake the weight of my words. "He humiliated himself. I didn't say a thing that wasn't already true." Her eyes narrowed, the mask slipping for just a second before she pasted the brittle smile back on. "You always were the difficult one," she said quietly. "No," I corrected her, my tone flat. "I was the one who refused to pretend." Her grip loosened. She turned on her heel and walked away, heels clicking like punctuation marks on polished wood. The night carried on around me, guests dancing, clinking glasses, snapping photos, but for my family, the shine had worn off. Kate smiled for the camera, but the cracks showed. My dad avoided my table completely, stiff-backed and silent. My mom kept her mask in place, but I saw the tension in her jaw. I stayed calm, steady, letting every uncomfortable glance wash over me. The reception would end, the guests would go home, the flowers would wilt, but the truth had already been said out loud. And no one could take it back. 2 weeks after the wedding, a thick envelope arrived in my mailbox. Department of the Army seal, bold black letters spelling out my name, Lieutenant Colonel Claire Donovan. Inside was the official notice that my promotion to colonel had been confirmed by the board months earlier. I'd known it was coming, but holding that letter in my hands felt different. Not because of the rank, though that carried its own weight, but because of the timing. My family spent Kate's wedding trying to shrink me, and here was proof they never had the power. I didn't call to tell them. I didn't send a group text or post a photo online. Instead, I drove to base the next morning, updated the nameplate outside my office, and shook the hands of the few people who knew what the promotion really meant. Quiet nods, genuine congratulations, no half smiles or backhanded comments. Recognition earned, not handed out of obligation. Back home, the silence from my parents stretched on. No calls, no emails. Until one afternoon, my old neighbor Mrs. Granger phoned. She'd known our family since we were kids, the type who baked pies for block parties and never missed a chance to chat. "I saw your daddy yesterday," she said brightly. "He told me you got promoted. Said he raised a soldier. He's just beaming with pride." I let the silence hang for a second. "That's what he said?" "Oh yes," she laughed. "Prouder than a rooster on Sunday morning." I smiled faintly. Well, there are worse things he could say. I didn't correct her. I didn't explain how little he'd actually had to do with it. Let him play the proud father in retirement community gossip. Let him wear credit he never earned. It didn't touch me anymore. In my apartment, a blank stretch of wall waited for something I hadn't figured out yet. I had boxes of photos, uniform shots, award ceremonies, official portraits with flags folded in the background, but none of them felt right. None of them captured what mattered. Scrolling through my phone, I found the one my cousin had texted me from the wedding. It wasn't posed. Wasn't meant as a keepsake. Just a candid shot, me walking out of the reception hall, navy dress rippling slightly in the night breeze. My back was to the camera, straight and strong, chin lifted. No ribbons, no uniform, no title. Just me, walking away. I printed it the next morning, bought a walnut frame with a thin brass inlay, and hung it dead center on the wall. No plaque, no caption. The image said enough. In the weeks that followed, I took on a new cadet shadowing our division, a first-year ROTC student named Alia Mendoza. First-generation American, daughter of Honduran immigrants, sharp-eyed and quick-minded. She reminded me of myself at her age, quiet in the wrong rooms, loud in the right ones, still learning how not to shrink when people underestimated her. We walked the grounds together after exercises. She asked questions others were too shy to ask. One afternoon, she turned to me and said, "Did you always know they'd respect you eventually?" I shook my head. Number. But I knew I'd earn it anyway. She nodded slowly, taking that in. "I want that too." "You will," I told her. "Just remember you don't get to choose the name they call you first. But you damn well get to choose the one they remember." Her grin was small but sure, the kind that meant the words had landed. And in that moment, I realized the best revenge wasn't just the public toast, or Palmer shutting Kate down, or even the new rank on my chest. The best revenge was building something that lasted longer than a wedding day. Passing it forward, leaving a mark no one in Charleston could erase. Kate never reached out after the wedding. Neither did my parents. The silence spoke louder than anything they could have said. But I didn't need their words. I didn't need their applause. Because when I stood in uniform at the next briefing, when the room of officers quieted as I walked in, I felt it. Authority, respect, trust. All the things my family withheld, handed to me without hesitation by people who actually understood what they meant. That was the difference. My family measured worth in bouquets and photo spreads. The army measured it in responsibility, in whether people would follow you when it mattered. And I'd take the latter every time. So yes, at my sister's wedding, she mocked my rank. She wanted me smaller, muted, erased. But she wasn't the one who got the last word. Her boss shut her down, her guests saw the truth, and the life I'd built stood taller than any insult ever could. Family revenge stories aren't always about yelling or walking out in dramatic fashion. Sometimes the revenge is quieter, sometimes it's letting the truth stand on its own while everyone else is forced to watch. And in the end, that's what I carried with me, not their laughter, not their dismissal, not their silence, just the truth. The truth that I never needed their approval to know exactly who I was. Looking back, that day wasn't about a wedding at all, it was about finally seeing where I stood, my sister's insults, my parents' silence, the laughter from the crowd. They all proved what I had known for years. But the real victory wasn't clapping back or raising my voice. It was standing tall, letting others speak the truth, and showing everyone that respect is earned, not granted by family favoritism. That's the heart of family revenge stories, the moments when the people who tried to humiliate you end up exposed by their own choices. If you enjoy powerful revenge stories, real family drama, and the kind of family revenge stories that remind you the truth always comes out, make sure you subscribe to the channel. And tell me in the comments, have you ever faced a moment when family underestimated you, only to watch you rise higher than they expected? I'd love to read your story.